I love you, Cleveland, and I love you, Ohio. And a very pleasant welcome to this week's version, Bonus Time with Drennan, here on the Big Play Sports Network. Great to have you with us. I'm Bruce Drennan, along with Ryan Smith. Got so much to cover on today's show. Ryan, how you doing this week, partner?
Oh, I'm doing very well, Bruce. The weather's starting to come around, so I'm very, very happy about that. Always better life, in my opinion, when it's warm out. That's why I hope to be in Florida one day. Maybe not permanently, but maybe part-time. That's the dream. But nonetheless, I love it in here, Cleveland, and the weather's nice. Baseball is in full swing, and it's been a good week for me, Bruce.
Well said, well said. Now, we have so much to cover in the second segment. We're going to be featuring Mike Yeager, the head golf professional at Columbia Hills Country Club, where I'm a proud member. Mike will be previewing the PGA, of course, the second major of the year at Valhalla. That's outside of Louisville. And in the third segment, the Ask Bruce segment, will cover the Guardians and also preview the Preakness, the second leg of the Triple Crown of horse racing. But here in the first segment, I want to concentrate on the Cleveland Cavaliers, and who better to feature than my former producer for so many years, including most recently when I was on the network, the statewide network. Gene Winters is joining us. He is, of course, in the last few years been the statistical graphics designer for the Cavaliers telecasts on Bally Sports Ohio. We have featured Gene here throughout the playoffs, and once again, we want to have him on before it's too late, because tonight might be it. Gino, how you doing, partner?
Good, not too bad. How are you guys?
Well, good. Let me start by saying I really commend the Cavaliers for the effort the other night. I mean, considering how undermanned they were, the news that Mitchell couldn't play, and really a valiant effort, I thought, by this team that we didn't even think had a chance going into the series against Boston. Many thought they would be swept. The second game was just incredibly gratifying, but now we face the reality of elimination tonight.
Yeah, and with the injury report that keeps, it seems like rising as more Cavaliers keep popping up on it. And this is the part. This has been what J.B. Bickerstaff has had to deal with most of his time here in Cleveland. It seems like you get to that point and an injury happens. You look back at last year as they were getting into the playoffs with New York, injury bugs started to hit. This year, you get into the playoffs with Orlando. Jared Allen misses. Donovan Mitchell plays most of that series with a hurt leg, hurt calf, and able to work his way through and get through that series. Play the first 3 games of this series with Boston before he finally had to sit out. And you're playing without 2 of your best players. I think you've been able to see it. The defense has suffered a little bit. And unfortunately, when Donovan was in there, the Cavaliers didn't give him much help. As you said, in Game 4, luckily, a lot of the guys finally stepped up and showed what they could possibly do if they were clicking on all cylinders early.
The Celtics, on the other hand, have been missing Porzingis throughout this series, and some people say, well, they're missing Porzingis, but let's face the facts. The Boston roster is a lot more solid than our roster, and certainly deeper, Gene.
No doubt. And every team will come into Boston and focus on their big 2 with Brown and Tatum. And obviously, they're both all-stars. They're both very good players. The 2 of them average anywhere between 50 to 55 points a night combined. So you try to take one away, the other one scores. But what happens with the other auxiliary pieces? You mentioned Porzingis being out. Derek White has a huge game in the first game of this series against Cleveland, played very well against Miami. Game 3, it was Drew Holiday who stepped up for Boston and had a big game against the Cavaliers, where the Cavaliers have been looking for that piece to step up instead of Donovan having to score 30, 40 every single night. The Evan Mobley really hasn't been there. Darius Garland, outside of the last game, really has been missing when Donovan has been on the court, and you haven't really got anything from the bench. Al Horford, on the other hand, for Boston, even though he's starting, he's been able to score a little bit. Pritchard coming off the bench has been outstanding for Boston. It's like that perfect storm for Boston. You look at them being just a starter-driven team in this series, their bench has really helped.
Well, rather than getting into I don't want to say nonsense of trying to break down how the Cavaliers could stay alive and win this game in Boston. I mean, again, as you know, working so closely with me throughout all of these years, Gene, I'm a realist. I'm objective and I'm a realist. And I can't see any way that the Cavaliers can win this game tonight. Now, what is the status of Mitchell? Is he going to play?
This is what worries me a little bit. Now, now take this for what the regular season has been for the last couple of years with the Cavaliers. If a guy is on the injury report the day of or the day prior, they usually sit. If it's doubtful, questionable, whatever, in the regular season, they've been out. We've seen that so far through the playoffs this year. The day before the guy was on, Mitchell hasn't played. Obviously, Jared Allen, even though he's been going through a little bit of the practices, has not played yet. So take it for what it's worth. Obviously, the playoffs are a different animal, and you need everyone on hand. But as of this morning, Karis LeVert, Jared Allen, Donovan Mitchell, and Porter Jr. were all on the injury report. If they follow through what they have done in the regular season, I would not expect to see any of those four players tonight.
All right, let's get to the bigger picture, because I think the inevitable is in what we can foresee maybe as soon as this evening. The Bickerstaff controversy, whether he should be retained or let go. I have been saying all along, and you know, Gene, throughout the years, I have called for coaches to be replaced, especially with the Browns. I mean, it seems like every other year with the Browns, I'm calling for a coach to be removed. Cavaliers, not so much. Managers with the Indians, Manny Acta, even at a point where Eric Wedge, I think, had exceeded his effectiveness. But so I haven't hesitated in that regard. And as you know, I have worked for flagship stations, both on radio and certainly the television home of these teams. And that's never prevented me from calling for a coach or a manager's job. But I also pride myself in fairness and objectivity. In this case with Bickerstaff, I have said all along, and I said it to you weeks ago when I had you on the show, and I've talked to you about this off the air. In the first half of the season, when the Cavs were missing Garland and Mobley, this team ascended to the number 2 seed in the Eastern Conference. Then in the second half, when Mitchell got hurt, they went down to number 4, which is their position going into this postseason. I predicted at the beginning of the season that the Cavs would be a 4 seed, and perhaps with a little luck, good fortune, they could be a 3 seed. How can Bickerstaff, I just think that it's noteworthy that you point out, in fairness to Bickerstaff, what he did do with all of these injuries, which you alluded to earlier in your opening comment. That's one factor. Now, here's another factor. Last year was an extreme disappointment in the playoffs because we expected to beat New York, and we were eliminated rather quickly by a more physical team. Altman supposedly bulked us up a little bit during the offseason. We come into this postseason with expectations that we must win this first round, or Bickerstaff definitely is gone. As hard fought, as intense, going down to the last game, the 7th and final game, the Cavs did advance by beating Orlando, a young, aspiring, physical team. So there's that. Now, if the Cavs are eliminated tonight, as we expect will be the case, hopefully no, but if they are, there's going to be intense conversation about replacing Bickerstaff right away. A few other points. How can, if Altman doesn't drastically change the makeup of this roster, and I'm going to get to that in a second, if he doesn't do that, what do the fans think a new coach is going to do with the same roster? Are they going to all of a sudden be a challenge to Boston in the Eastern Conference? I, for one, think that's ludicrous. Number 2, if indeed Altman tries to bolster the roster, whether they hold on to Bickerstaff or they fire Bickerstaff, How are they going to lure free agents to Cleveland? For God's sakes, we couldn't. LeBron James, when he was here, especially the second time, couldn't lure a free agent, a big name free. Shaquille O'Neal was over the hill, let's face it. How can you lure, if LeBron James couldn't do it, Kevin Love was a trade. So how are you going to do that? And then again, the draft status, this is a playoff team. So there's all of that taken into consideration. I just have to be fair to Bickerstaff. Now, I'm not saying, Gene, that he shouldn't be second-guessed for rotation decisions, matchups, and all of that. But let's be fair, and I don't know, maybe we would be a little bit better, but we can't win the Eastern Conference with this roster. I don't care if you bring back Red Auerbach.
Sure. And that's the part where the injuries are the biggest factor of this whole thing, because what if Jared Allen was in this series without Porzingis? Does that change it a little bit? Maybe Boston has a couple fewer shots at the rim. Maybe things turn a little bit different. But I still think Boston wins this series with Jared Allen or not. So you look at JB Bickerstaff. You go back 2 years ago, they get into the play-in tournament. They had, Brooklyn, and then they hosted Atlanta. They ended up falling and not making the postseason, the real postseason. Then next year, then you get the New York Knicks after battling those injuries, as you talked about last year. The injuries came a little bit later, where most of them started in March, but they had a good bulk of the season with the guys together. Unfortunately, the injuries hit towards the end, and they got bounced in the playoffs. This year, you get to that point. Now, remember, Orlando is the team that they wanted to face. That last game of the year against Charlotte, they had the lead going into the third quarter, where they could have been possibly the 2 or the 3 seed, depending on what happened with Milwaukee and New York. At the point when the third quarter started, the Cavaliers were the only one of those 3 teams winning their game. They put in all their bench players. You had Isaiah Mobley running the point for a little bit in that last fourth quarter against Charlotte. They fall to the 4 seed because they felt Boston would have been, I don't want to say an easier matchup, a less physical matchup against their team. Now, again, not knowing that.
You mean Orlando. You mean Orlando.
No, thinking of Boston. They already had their sights past Orlando. We'll take Orlando. They're young. We'll end up beating them because we've had success the last 2 seasons against Orlando. So
liking the matchup against Boston more so than going up perhaps against that physical Knicks team again.
Then that was the part. Let's take our chances against Boston because they're not as physical as New York. Now, obviously, as we've seen this postseason play out, New York's been playing extremely hurt. They did get their 3-2 lead against the Pacers, but they have been battling injuries as well. So could have this been a different series if the Cavaliers were in that 2 or 3 spot? Now, again, this is all hypothetical thinking now because they went with what they thought was their best outcome to get to the second round and take their chances against Boston. Unfortunately, the injuries have hampered this a little bit. But getting, a little bit back to the original question and JB and what to do, what's the option? If you get rid of JB after 5 seasons, who are you going after? The Suns already went out and got Budenholzer, the former Bucks and Atlanta coach. The Lakers are still trying to find their head coach with rumors about former players. Who's that guy? If you want to get rid of JB, who's the replacement? And I think that's the question. And how much of this are you trying to placate to Donovan Mitchell a little bit? Obviously, this offseason is going to be a big one for him. I don't see him signing his extension. Why not? Why do it this year when next year the TV money is going to be there? And maybe the salary caps and
don't get ahead. Don't get ahead of me on Mitchell. Again, I said Red Auerbach, Pat Riley, Phil Jackson. I don't care who it is. If this roster isn't drastically changed, how can the fans expect a new coach replacing the coach on the bench and in practice going to make a difference to winning this Eastern Conference?
Right. And you thought, and now you would think going into next year with the same roster, could Orlando be better next season?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And where do the Cavs then factor in? Atlanta, they were in the play-in tournament. They have the number 1 overall pick now. Not to say that a rookie could come in and turn things around, but Atlanta could come back on that that upswing back into the postseason. We know what the Pacers have been able to do. They score without playing defense. We've talked about that the last couple of times I've been on. Can they make that jump? So are you going to be staying at a 2, 3, 4, or are you going to be in that bottom half fighting to stay out of the play-in tournament and actually getting into the real playoffs next season? And that's the part now. And Dan Gilbert, Kobe Altman, JB, and all those guys are going to have to get together and try to figure out what is the best path for the Cavaliers going forward. And now that Dan's been back and around a little bit more, does he get a little bit more hands-on in this decision, not only on JB, but maybe you have to think about Kobe Altman as well?
There's only so much Altman can do, too. I mean, I actually think that I've actually complimented Altman the last few years for keeping the ship afloat since the departure of LeBron James. I'll go back as far as the departure of LeBron James. I think it's commendable that this team is a playoff team as recently as that departure, quite frankly. But I don't know what the Cavs can do. Again, they're not going to be able to lure big-name free agents. They can't do that. The draft status is what it is. They're a playoff team. What can they do, Gene?
It's going to, like you're saying, it's going to have to be on trades. You look at last year, Max Strus was involved in a trade where he ended up setting Osman and Lamar Stevens out, and it was a part of a three-way deal. George Niang was the guy that you ended up bringing in. Damian Jones was the guy that ended up coming in here at the end. But what are you going to trade? Do you make a Caris LeVert available? Do you make Not that I would do
those
this.
are secondary. That's the secondary level. I have argued for years, with the exception of the Detroit Pistons, when they had that great camaraderie team. They're the exception to the rule many years ago. But you need a superstar and at least one all-star. Now, there's a difference between a superstar and an all-star, as I have preached for years. Yeah. You need a superstar and at least one all-star, or you need 3 or 4 all-stars. That Detroit team had all-stars. They didn't have a superstar. And I'm talking not the Isaiah Thomas team, the team after that for Detroit. But so outside of Mitchell, I mean, okay, Mobley is aspiring. I mean, somebody said to me yesterday on the golf course, I said, well, Mobley needs to beef up. I said, well, look at his physique. What are you going to have him? Put him on a Burger King diet the rest of the whole entire offseason? I mean, come on. He said, well, at least 10 pounds. I don't know if that's going to make a difference with Mobley. I like him a lot. I like Allen a lot. Garland, okay. And how are they going to hold on to Mitchell? Isn't he destined to go to New York?
I think they're somewhere. And back to Evan Mobley just for a minute. Go back, you tell your guy tomorrow or next time you're at the course, maybe later today. This past offseason, Mobley put on anywhere between 10 to 20 pounds of bulk in this past offseason.
Well, you could hardly tell.
Right. If you want him to do that again, kind of what you're talking about. What do you want him to do? And
that affects his mobility.
No doubt.
You would think.
Yes. And that's the part. As you're talking about, you have your superstar in Donovan Mitchell. Who or what do you want to be that next piece? Do you want it to be Mobley? Do you want it to be Allen? Do you want it to be Darius Garland? Because I think if you're trying to get this team to that next level, those are your best trade assets. Maybe this past trade deadline in February that passed, maybe you could have received some kind of value for Caris LeVert, but coming into an offseason, what does he garner? What we've seen from Strus in this postseason, can you move him for anything? That's the part now where
I know
you have your guy. Who are you going to identify as that Robin to Donovan Mitchell's Batman? And if Mitchell, if he's the one you're trying to target now to keep around here, as I alluded to a little bit, he's not going to sign the extension this year. You go to next year when the TV contracts are up and you have the money's there.
Yeah,
so
I
think that part when he declines and doesn't sign an extension, Cleveland doesn't have to get into an uproar. Just look ahead to the year, to the next year. But you have no assets to start moving either because you traded them all to Utah for Donovan Mitchell to bring him here. So
I gotta think that he's going to want to go home, especially with the advances that New York organization has made in the last couple of years. I gotta think that. Well, it's not an. Go ahead.
Let's say you move Donovan Mitchell. Now, Are you trying to build around Garland? Because you're probably going to have to give him a max contract. Now, Mobley and Jared Allen, are those your three that you're now hooking you're hooking the wagon to?
Yeah, that's not enough.
Like
that's not enough. It's not enough to win. It's not enough to win the East, in my opinion.
Right, you get back into that hamster in a wheel. Yeah, you're fighting, but you're in the postseason, but. Yeah. Is it good enough?
Yeah, there's some very serious, so all of these considerations and replacing Altman, what is that going to do? Again, you just aptly described, there's hardly any assets. I mean, you trade, peaches for pears. I mean, that's what you're talking about here. Again, you must have a superstar or a couple of superstars or a superstar and a couple of all-stars or one all-star for sure, and then these type players that we've been describing that the Cavaliers do possess. So it's not an enviable situation for the Cavs this offseason, even though, and there's some who would say, hey, listen, considering that we make the playoffs every year and some fans are satisfied, that's fine. That's fine for them. I just turned 74 years old and I want to see another championship. So there's that too, and particularly with the Guardians, which is another topic. Before I let you go, New York took the lead on Indiana last night. Any comment there?
No, and I think this is how we thought it was going to play out, even though the New York started to get hit with the injury bug throughout this series with Brunson, who's been able to play through it. You had Hartenstein there in the last game get hurt, but I think this is what we thought. You have your superstar who put the rest of the team on his back, playing hurt, going out and scoring 40, 44 last night against the Pacers to make sure that his team won at home and took a 3-2 lead when they went back to Indiana. I still think New York advances. Again, I just don't see them being a competition to Boston either. We talked about it one of the first times I was on. I think this is Boston, riding through right to the NBA Finals and then taking their chance with whoever comes out of the West.
Right, and Dallas and Oak City putting on a good series, that's nice, but I still say Denver's a team to beat. What about their comeback? If they stay healthy, I still say they're the team to beat. It's just like the KC Chiefs. Until somebody dethrones them, I got to go with the champs.
Yeah, and it looked very good early on for Minnesota, taking the first two in Denver and then coming back home with a 2-0 lead, then giving up both of those games. And as you talked about, it was just a matter of time before Jokic and the guys settled in, putting up MVP numbers throughout this playoffs, collecting his trophy last night for winning his third MVP award already. That's the part. They're now set in a prime spot to close it out tomorrow or Friday, so they can then get it in advance. You look at on the other side with Dallas and OKC. Dallas blows a double-digit lead late. They come into the series tied 2-2. And this is that one is going to be kind of like Orlando and Cleveland in the first round. Dallas and OKC is the entertaining series here in the second round of the postseason.
Well, Gino, thank you so much for rendering your expertise to us these last few weeks with the Cavs in the playoffs. And hey, now you've switched over to the Indians crew, or Guardians crew, I should say, and doing the same statistical designing. So maybe we'll have you on in a few weeks, talk some baseball, because that, just like John Wooden, the greatest college basketball coach of all time, his favorite sport was baseball. Gene is an NBA expert. His favorite sport is baseball. So we'll have you back, Gino.
Yeah, anytime. This team has been fun for the first 6-7 weeks of the season so far to watch, and I'm just interested to see how this continues to progress with what the Central Division has to offer this year. This should be a good run for Vogt and the Indians, or the Guardians, excuse me.
Gene winners. All right, we'll be back in a minute. Mike Yeager, the head golf professional at Columbia Hills Country Club, my home course, will be joining us to preview the second major of the year, the PGA Championship. That's next on Bonus Time with Drennan here on the Big Play Sports Network. So glad to have you aboard for this version of Bonus Time with Drennan here on the Big Play Sports Network. Well, the second major of the year is upon us. It's the PGA Championship. I'm so glad they made the decision to switch the PGA from August here to May because there was such a gap between the Masters and the U.S. Open. So starting on Thursday will be the first round of the PGA Championship. and who better to give us a preview than Mike Yeager, my good friend and the head golf professional at Columbia Hills Country Club, where I'm a proud member. Hi, Mike. How you doing, pal?
I'm doing well, Mr. Drennan. How are you doing today?
Mike, I played with Mike last Sunday. He played 9 holes with us. I went to full 18, but he played 9 holes, and he went to did his due diligence to visit his beloved mother. But I played with 9 with Mike, and based on your swing, I think you should be in the field for this PGA.
I think you're crazy. Oh, these are the world class golfers, and I'm happy to watch them on TV just like you.
Yeah, well, Mike's quite a player, friends. Trust me. You have had the privilege of playing Valhalla. This is outside of Louisville. Tell us about this golf course.
So I went down there 2 years ago with some college buddies, and we played the golf course and then did the Bourbon Trail. And 10 years ago, I actually attended the last PGA Championship, the one that Rory won in 2014. It is a long golf course. There's going to be a lot of drivers off the tee. I'd be shocked to see a lot of the players going with less than driver. The front and back are very different, where the back is more tree lined, the front is more open. And actually, when I played there 2 years ago in 2022, they were actually resodding the entire golf course with zoysia grass in preparation for this event. So they've been working at this for the last couple of years, and it should be quite a treat to watch.
Is there much water?
Not a ton. The biggest takeaway that I had from playing it, and we did it with caddies, was it was a long walk. I mean, there's some good distances between holes. I think the PGA guys are playing it at roughly 7,600 yards. So this is a big boy golf course.
This is outside Louisville. What is the terrain? Is it pretty level or is it hilly?
So yeah, again, going back, the front and back are very different to my recollection. I remember the back being more hilly, with a great deal more slope on it. Like I said, it almost feels like 2 different golf courses out there.
With that being said, are you surprised that Tiger Woods entered this field?
No, I'm not. He's always said this, that if he can't compete, he won't play. He won't take someone's spot. I mean, he made the cut the last time. He's probably got good memories. He won this golf tournament back when he was 24 years old. Obviously, he's 48 years old, and he hasn't been himself since the car accident in 2021, but you still see glimpses of it, right? So I think if he's able to get around 4 rounds and remain within striking distance, that's a win for him. Do I expect him to win the golf tournament? Absolutely not. But I think in his head that he still feels like he has a chance at it.
Yeah, he always said if he doesn't think he can win, he's not going to compete. He's 170 to 1 odds. Phil Mickelson is 250 to 1, so that should make him feel good. I really like the PGA a lot because it's not as tough as the U.S. Open, but it plays usually tougher than the Masters or the British. The severity of the rough is not U.S. Open rough, but it's still pretty brutal. Do you anticipate them narrowing the fairways at Valhalla and making the rough penalizing?
I mean, just what I've seen on the preview shows and things like that, I know they have fescue and the zoysia mix in their rough. So the golf ball will sit up in that if you get the right lie, but if they get into an area where there's bent grass creeping in, it'll fall to the bottom and be very difficult. I think the length of this golf course will be the determining factor. So I wouldn't be shocked to see one of the longer ball hitters come out victorious this week.
The last time before this year that Scotty Scheffler won the Masters, that's his only other major. He has 2 majors. He has 2 Masters green jackets. The first major of this 2024 season and the Masters he won before. The Masters that he won before, the PGA was the next major. They had already switched from August to here in May. He didn't make the cut. Now, his wife was still expecting. He is entered in the field. What do you think?
Well, his wife Meredith gave birth last week.
Oh,
actually.
she did. Oh, okay. Okay.
So, I mean, outside of that, he's won 4 out of his last 5 starts on tour, including that Masters. But that being said, he just welcomed a baby boy into the world and hasn't played competitive golf in roughly a month. We know what that can do to a player's swing. That being said, he's still far and away the best player in the world, so it's definitely hard to bet against him going into this week. But yeah, maybe now that he's got the baby part of his life completed, that he can focus on golf.
Well, Brooks Koepka is the defending champion. Koepka has 5 major crowns. He has 3 PGAs and 2 U.S. Opens. And he's the defending champion, and he's been playing very well in the LIV. So what do you think his chances are? He's at 12-1. Scheffler's 4-1. He's the favorite. The next favorite, Koepka, is 12-1. McIlroy 7-1, coming off that win just this past weekend at Wells Fargo.
Yeah, in regards to Koepka, I think you and I have spoken to it either on air or here at the club, but ever since he got his knee reconstructed and he started feeling healthy, you can tell his mental game's changed dramatically. And that's, I think, part of why he won last year at Oak Hill by 2 shots, entering that rarefied air of being a 5-time major champion. So it'd be pretty silly to discount him. I think he's a good sneaky pick. He always shows up big at majors. I'm excited to see him get out there.
Yeah, what do you think of McIlroy's chances? I mean, that had to give him a boost winning the Wells Fargo, but you mentioned 10 years ago his last PGA, and he came out of the gate as a kid winning all these majors, and he's been on such a long drought, Mike.
Yeah, I think he's playing some of the best golf that we've seen and finishing the golf tournament. I mean, he's won his last 2 starts, which has to give him just tons of confidence going into Valhalla. But I don't know if you heard about this. He announced yesterday that he and his wife are getting a divorce, which I thought was ironic because I actually mentioned after his win on Sunday that I was shocked to not see his wife, Erica, and his daughter, Poppy, out there to greet him afterwards, because they're traditionally always at these golf tournaments. So odd timing that he announces the separation from his wife this week. I'm sure he's going to get hammered by the press and have to answer a lot of tough questions about that.
Yeah, and that can be a major distraction. I did hear that about McIlroy. Of course, that's not something that happens overnight, so that had to be on his mind at Wells Fargo. It didn't seem to affect him.
That's a fair point. I agree.
What about Ludwig Aberg? There's a lot of talk about this guy, and he is certainly a great player.
He's super fun to watch. I mean, he obviously snuck up on not a name that the casual fan would know, but he's dominated the junior ranks and the college ranks, and he's not slowing down on tour. He seems like a fearless golfer. Obviously, a lot of these tracks are first-time plays for him, so I'm sure there's a learning curve. But I think you're going to know his name and see him at the top of leaderboards for years to come.
Let me throw out 3 more. Colin Morikawa's 22-1. John Rahm is 16-1. Xander Schauffele is 16-1. They're considered 3 of the favorites and certainly noteworthy players that are capable of winning.
Yeah, Schauffele's the one that dominates these golf tournaments but can't close the door. He needs to win a golf tournament against the best competition in the world, I think, more so for his confidence. You saw him fade away on Sunday, and Rory obviously was playing amazing golf, but it was a 2-horse race on Sunday, and by the time the back 9 got started, he was kind of out of it.
Wyndham Clark is the defending U.S. Open champion, and I'm in a pool, and I took him in one of the categories because to win the U.S. Open, you've got to win at an extremely difficult golf course and the most difficult conditions. And the PGA at Valhalla is going to be like that. So what do you think his chances are?
He's another one that dominated in college golf and amateur golf as he was growing up. And then he faced some hurdles with his mental game. And it's widely known that he works with a mental coach, and that really helped him turn the corner to maximizing his potential. And as you mentioned, he won at a U.S. Open where you have to be about as mentally strong as humanly possible. And I think he should be in contention this week based on those facts.
DeChambeau had a very good Masters. As a matter of fact, it looked like he was going to dominate it there. At one round, I think he was 7 under at the Masters at Augusta National. He, of course, is a LIV golfer. He's 22-1, Mike.
Yeah, you started seeing some life out of him. The only thing that still gives me pause with any of these LIV golfers is we'll see them pop up on these leaderboards, but then they disappear going into Sunday. Is that because they don't play 72 holes?
Right.
72 holes now. I mean, he's not an old man by any stretch. He's been out here. He's played on the PGA Tour for years, so you'd hope he could. But that's kind of the common theme that I keep noticing is when these live guys get in contention, how quickly they disappear on the weekend.
You know, I had mentioned to you off the air, and I want you to comment on Dustin Johnson. He's certainly due. He has the length, we all know. You mentioned that it's going to take somebody who can really bomb the ball at Valhalla because it's 7,600 yards. But how motivated is he with all of his money? Does he have the drive to win another major?
I don't think he ever had it. And I'm not an anti-Dustin Johnson by any stretch, but he's always seemed like the type of golfer that was just blessed with immense talent. He never really had to try very hard. Maybe he doesn't love golf, you know what I mean? But he was always very, very naturally good at it. And he made a lot of money doing that. And then when Liv offered him, however, hundreds of millions of dollars to go play on their tour, he was happy to jump ship and do it. I just don't feel like his heart's in it anymore, or if it ever was, to be honest with you. I think he was just an amazing golfer with natural talent, didn't have to work extraordinarily hard at it. And obviously now his bank account's full. So
I would say that guaranteed money with Liv. Is there anybody else I haven't asked you about that might be a sleeper to you?
I love Matsuyama. I know you and I have talked about him quite a bit. He withdrew from the Wells Fargo with injury, so that makes me a little nervous. Jordan Spieth, everybody talks about Rory completing his career Grand Slam. Everybody kind of forgets that if Spieth wins a PGA, that would be a Grand Slam for him as well. But based on his recent play, man, that would certainly be a shock. I think you hit all the big guys. I mean, I think it's going to be Scheffler, McIlroy, the usual suspects. Maybe a Max Homa could make a run, or a Will Zalatoris. And I think it's going to be someone with major experience. I know that traditionally, I think 6 out of the last 10 majors have been won by someone that's won a major. So I think having a major win in your pocket could greatly help you in this sort of event. So something to keep an eye on as well.
Well, yeah, another name, based on what you just said, that has competed well in the majors but hasn't been able to finish is Victor Hovland.
Yeah, and it's mind-boggling, right? He was playing at the top of the world last year as the season ended, and I think everyone was very excited to see what he was going to do this year. And then he went and changed his swing, as many in the world have. Rory, Tiger, it's well documented. But it always just blows my mind when these guys are at the top of their game and they want to reinvent their swing, and it has hurt him this year. There's just no two ways about it. He's not himself. He's fighting his swing. So it would shock me quite a bit to see him in contention this week.
You know, at majors, they'll start half the field on the first tee and the other half in the morning session on the 10th tee. And then in the afternoon, they'll do the same thing, and they flip-flop going to Friday. I've never asked you this, Mike. Does that have an effect on these guys in any way or form? Starting on 10 instead of 1, they practice 1 through 18. They're used to playing 1 through 18. Is that ever a factor?
I don't believe the starting hole is a factor. I think the morning and afternoon waves, as you've seen in recent tournament history, can really be a factor, especially with weather. I mean, I love having the PGA Championship in May to get to watch another major early. But something to keep an eye on is that weather. I mean, this is in Kentucky, outside Louisville. We all know it's not much different than Northeast Ohio, where they're going to get spring thunderstorms and things like that. So if you get stuck with a late tee time on a Thursday, get some weather, have to go back out Friday to finish your Thursday round, that could turn into a long day mentally and physically.
Yeah. 151 tomorrow on Thursday on the first tee. Colin Morikawa, Phil Mickelson, and Fitzpatrick are teamed together. That's interesting. At 2:02, Ricky Fowler, John Rahm, and Cameron Young. Fowler's another one. Yeah, I've never been a big fan. The women love him. A lot of people think his dress attire. And I hear he's a great guy, but I just don't think he's ever going to win a major, Mike.
Yeah, it certainly seems like he's plateaued. I know he's a grinder. He works super hard on his game. He went to that jailbird putter, which helped him quite a bit to get into contention. I'd love to see him win one. Yeah, I really would. I think it would kind of just put the icing on the cake for his career. I'm not going to say he's going to go on a run to become number one in the world, but he could definitely steal a major at any time.
At 2:13 tomorrow, starting at number 1, Wyndham Clark, the defending U.S. Open champion. Brian Harman, the defending Open champion, the British Open champion, and Scotty Scheffler. What a threesome that is. My goodness.
Yeah, the PGA had some fun with some of these pairings. The patrons are in for a treat, that's for sure.
On the 10th hole at 8:04 tomorrow morning, Tiger Woods, Adam Scott, Keegan Bradley. 8:15, Rory McIlroy, Dustin Johnson, and Justin Rose. That's very attractive. At 8:26, Cameron Smith, Hideki Matsuyama, and Victor Hovland. That's also. And then at 8:37, Koepka, Max Homa, and Jordan Spieth. Homa's a good player, too.
Oh, yeah, he's on my list to watch for sure. He seems fairly unflappable. He's a top 10, top 20 machine. I mean, he was, I think, 10 shots out on Sunday, and he wiggled his way, I believe, into the top 10, finish there. The other one to keep an eye on is Justin Thomas. I know he has not been playing the best golf of his career this year, but he's a Louisville native. Not to say that this is a home field advantage for him or anything like that, but he's won the PGA Championship twice. This is his hometown. He's got the pedigree, so I'd keep an eye on him as well.
Now, it's been a few years since you played it. They won't make the greens as fast as the U.S. Open, but they're going to be slick, are they not?
Yeah, the one thing that's interesting, and when I was down there 2 years ago that I realized is Valhalla has always been owned by the PGA of America. They've hosted, I believe, 4 majors and a Ryder Cup over the years. And they sold the property. They sold it to some private business owners from the Louisville area. So this could kind of be the swan song, for lack of better words, for hosting these types of tournaments at Valhalla. The PGA of America just built a beautiful golf course down in Frisco, Texas, where they're going to start hosting majors. So this could be the last time they host one. So I'm sure they're going to put their best foot forward and make it fun for everyone to watch.
Do you have a pick?
It's hard to go against Scheffler. The only pick that I'm struggling with is Rory. I always have to talk myself into picking him, but based on his last 2 weeks' performance, if his personal life doesn't bother him too much, I mean, he's one of the longest hitters in the world, which will suit him well. If he can roll the ball on those greens the way he has been the last 2 weeks, he's going to be pretty hard to beat.
You know who I like? You forgot already, didn't you?
Koepka?
Koepka!
Oh, that man is not scared of anyone. As long as he can get out of his own way and put his head down and play golf, I would not be shocked to see him in contention on Sunday whatsoever.
Yeah, getting out of his own way. Great way to put it. Mike Yeager, head golf professional, Columbia Hills Country Club. I'm a proud member. Mike, see you at the club. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you before the U.S. Open, pal.
You got it. Enjoy the golf this weekend.
When we come back, we'll cover the Guardians. The Preakness is coming up Saturday. Second leg of the Triple Crown of horse racing. And it's the Ask Bruce segment on Bonus Time with Drennan here on the Big Play Sports Network. Now here is the risk that Crown had to take with Welcome back. Bonus Time with Drennan, Big Play Sports Network. Ryan Smith is my producer. Any comment on, obviously, either the PGA upcoming event with Mike Yeager as our guest or Gene Winters talking about the Cavaliers in segment 1?
Well, I'm certainly more in tune with the Cavaliers than I am this PGA Tour coming up. But just for the Cavaliers, I'll say, I mean, a lot of crucial decisions coming up. I mean, I don't want to speak it into existence, but if Donovan Mitchell leaves, then of course you wonder, what are you going to build around? And it goes back to your point, Bruce. You know, you mentioned you have to have a superstar and at least an all-star if you really want to compete in this league. And that's very true. I think it's the most supercentric league that there is in the major sports. And, you know, Donovan Mitchell proved to me before his injury, the way he was playing, and even now in the postseason before he got ruled out, he was a superstar. I feel very comfortable giving him that label. And, you know, the real bad part was Darius Garland was supposed to be that all-star. Evan Mobley was supposed to be that all-star. And Evan Mobley is amazing defensively, but offensive, his game is not nowhere near an all-star level offensively. And you know what? Jared Allen was the closest thing we had. I thought he should have been an all-star this year, but it just goes back to disappointment of many key players, that being Darius, that being Max Strus, that being George Niang, your big offseason additions in the latter two. And it's just unfortunate that it didn't work out. So there's going to be a ton of questions that maybe Kobe Altman will have to answer. I mean, maybe he gets fired too. I think JB, it's written on the wall there, but I really wouldn't rule it out either if both of them are gone.
Wow. All right, well, the Guardians went through a little funk, and now they seem to get their act together as they're coming off another victory down in Texas against the world champions, 7-4 victory, a 6-run second inning with Naylor kissing his 12th home run of the season. He's now got 33 RBIs. Carrasco and Gray go in the finale of the series down there as the Guardians still in first place, 27-16, 1.5 game lead on KC, 2 on Minnesota, 5.5 on Detroit. And, of course, the White Sox, the lowly White Sox, who did pretty well against us.
Yeah, you never want to drop those games to those to teams like that. You want to get fat when you can, especially now that Kansas City's right there about breathing on our necks and the Twins are rattling off wins left and right. So that is never good. But it's good to see them bounce back against the Rangers. They clinched the series, a chance to sweep them as we're filming here tonight. So I'm still very high on our Guardians. Just keep the bats up. Josh Naylor has been incredible. And, it's going to be hard to navigate without Quan, but it's just something that they're going to have to do.
When do we expect Quan back? Still a couple, 3 weeks away, isn't he?
Yeah, I think they listed it as a 4-week injury.
Yeah. Sooner back the better, because that batting average, you can see without him in that lineup leading off as he does, and then the swing around, he sorely missed. Well, New York has overtaken Baltimore for first place in the Eastern Division. They have a half-game lead over the Birds, the 28-15, the Yankee record, to 26-14 for Baltimore. Boston, all of a sudden, has come alive, and they're above the 500 mark. That's got to please their fans. Tampa Bay and Toronto. That is such a brutal division, Ryan. My goodness gracious, top to bottom. Hard to believe that Toronto's 19-22, but when you're playing so many games against your own division, they're beating up on one another.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like football when you look at the Browns. When you go look at this year, the strength of schedule, Browns, Steelers, and Ravens all in the top 3. Why? It's not a coincidence, because they all play each other twice a year.
Yeah. Seattle still leads the American League West. Texas only a game and a half back, but the big story there is Houston. Houston has a 17-25 record. They are 5.5 games out of first place, which is not insurmountable by any stretch of the imagination. But when you think about this great team, I mean, they actually are quite fortunate that Seattle or Texas don't have a much better record, and the gap is even wider.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the issue is, Bruce. I mean, I know Alex Bregman has not had a good season at all. I think Jose Altuve is still playing pretty well.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, everybody knows Jose Abreu. He got sent down. I mean, that guy has been just horrible the last 2 years. I'm not sure what it is. I mean, Josh Hader, when they got him, I thought, that was going to be, you get to the sixth inning.
He got the win last night. He got the win in relief last night, went 2 innings.
Yeah, but I figured the whole this year, with their setup, you get to the 6th, 7th inning, have your starter go, and then after that, it's right. Chalk. But it hasn't been that way this year.
Hader's ERA was over 5, I think, going into that game yesterday.
Yeah, I think it was.
He's blown a couple of saves, and he's blown some opportunities when he isn't in a save situation. I think another factor, too, they've had some injuries. Framber Valdez just returned from IL. Javier was briefly on the IL, came back and got bombed. I think he's going tonight for them, but they're really a mystery. They truly are. In the National League, Philadelphia is holding on to their slim lead of 2 games over the Atlanta Braves. They're 30-13. That represents the best record of any team in the major leagues. And then you have Washington, the Mets, and Miami, who are totally out of it. The National League Central is an interesting division, and that Milwaukee and the Cubs are 2 teams battling away, especially because of the Craig Counsell switch. Counsell for years was the manager of the Brewers. Now he's on the north side of Chicago with the Cubs, and his former team is leading his new team by a game and a half. Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, St. Louis well behind, and the Dodgers running away with the West, Ryan.
Yeah, no surprise there. I mean, what Shohei Ohtani has done in these last 2 weeks is just absolutely incredible. I mean, the stats, if you go look in the last 2 weeks, I mean, we're talking Barry Bonds numbers. Maybe not quite Barry Bonds numbers, but probably the closest thing we've seen since Barry Bonds, which is just mind-boggling to say, but the stats will tell you the truth.
Well, the Preakness is going to be run at Pimlico this coming Saturday in Baltimore, Maryland. That's the second leg of the Triple Crown of horse racing. And, of course, the Kentucky Derby winner, Mystic Dan, is racing. The trainer, Ken McPeak, had said after the Derby that they would run Mystic Dan. There was some doubt about it because he hasn't done well on only 2 weeks rest in his young career. career. And also he's going up against the Baffert horses, which were not in the Kentucky Derby because of Baffert being banned. But Mystic Dan is in the Derby, and he was an 18-1 shot or in the Preakness. He was an 18-1 shot in the Derby. He now has 7 starts with 3 wins, 1 second and 1 third. And of course, what a finish it was. The photo finish with Sierra Leone and Forever Young, just amazing. Neither one of those horses are in the Preakness, by the way. It's a 9-horse field. And let me run down some of the others that are serious contenders, I believe, to Mystic Dan, who I do not anticipate winning this Preakness. This is the shortest of the 3 races. The Derby's the middle race. The Preakness is the shortest. The Belmont Stakes in 3 weeks from this Saturday is by far the longest. Catching Freedom is a 6-1 choice. The trainer's Brad Cox, and Catching Freedom did race in the Kentucky Derby, finished 4th. Muth, M-U-T-H, Muth, 8-5. Trainer, you guessed it, Bob Baffert. 6 starts, get this, 4 wins, 2 seconds. Baffert has won 8 Preaknesses in his illustrious career. Had Baffert not been banned from the Derby, Muth would have probably been the favorite in the Kentucky Derby. As far as others, Seize the Gray, which is a 15-1 choice. D. Wayne Lucas, the famous trainer, has 9 starts with this horse, 3 wins, 3 thirds, and Lucas has won 6 previous Preakness crowns. Just Steel is 15-1. Another D. Wayne Lucas horse. 12 starts, 2 wins, 4 seconds, and 1 third. Imagination, 6-1. Trainer, Bob Baffert. 6 starts, 2 wins, 4 seconds, and had he run in the Kentucky Derby, he would have been, again, one of the favorites. Possibly a muddy track they're anticipating in Baltimore, out east with some weather. I understand Catching Freedom has run well in the mud. I don't know how much rain it'll take to turn that track into mud, but it's something to consider, that's for sure. All right, we're in the Ask Bruce segment. Fire away over there, Ryan.
All right, Bruce, I'm going to switch it up right now for this special episode. I'm going to give you a question that I have first to start us off. So we know, Bruce, it has been a long, long time, over 40 years, in fact, since the Cleveland Indians, now Guardians, have thrown a no-hitter. But over 40 years ago today, one Len Barker had not only a no-hitter, but a perfect game, Bruce. And I want you to tell me about that day, because I know you were there.
Yeah, I was doing the games on television with the late, great Joe Tate. And it was a cold, rainy type, wintry night. It was a sparse crowd of under 10,000, yet there are hundreds of thousands of people, as they say, over all these years. That said, they were there. It was a fascinating evening in several regards. Barker did not record his first strikeout. I think he wound up with 11. He did not record his first strikeout until the 4th inning, which is interesting. And after the 5th inning, I think he said from the 6th inning on, or the 7th inning, I think it was the 6th, he told me, that his curveball was so devastating. Now, he threw the ball in the upper 90s, his fastball, but his curveball was so devastating that he threw it exclusively to make the Blue Jays prove they could hit it to prevent the no-hitter, let alone the perfect game. And, of course, they couldn't. There were a couple of monumental plays, one made by second baseman Dwayne Kuiper, another one by third baseman Toby Harrah, who, it was a foul ball, but he reached over the stands, made a backhand catch like this, a tremendous play. You all remember Rick Manning with the pop, the short Texas leaguer to center field. He got the clinching out. Certainly, it was a fascinating night. Alfredo Griffin, Danny Ainge, actually the great basketball player from BYU and later the Boston Celtics, was a member of the Toronto Blue Jays and was the third baseman on that team in that particular game. Some tidbits for you. Also, a personal note, I was in the booth and the bottom of the top of the eighth was completed, and the director got in my ear, and he said, "Go down to the Indians dugout. We have a microphone and wire. The wireless mics were non-existent back then. So they said, go down. If Lenny gets it, we want you to go out and get an interview with him right away." So I left the booth after the top of the eighth inning, went down to the clubhouse, through the tunnel, into the Indians dugout, and there the producers were waiting for me with the microphone and the long cord. And sure enough, Lenny got the perfect game, and I ran out onto the field with my white trench coat, because, again, it was a cold, wintry night. And the extension cords, thank God, did not, detach. Thank God. And I got Lenny, and I had a great rapport with those players, because on the road trips I would hang with them. I was their age. I hung with them. I didn't hang with the rest of the media. I hung with them on the road trips. And so we had great pitching back then. We had John Denny, Bert Blyleven, Rick Sutcliffe, Lenny Barker. So any one of them were capable of throwing a no-hitter. Dan Spillner toyed with one in Chicago against the White Sox. Blyleven toyed with one in Toronto in the old exhibition stadium. And so I said to them, if you ever get one, I'll be there. You got to come to me first. So Lenny came right over to me. And there was some guy from the media, I don't know, suburban station or something, and he had one of these antiquated cassette recorders. They're rectangular, about like this size. And he's sticking it right in between my microphone and Barker's puss. And so I gave this guy the most vicious NBA elbow that you can imagine. I think he got the message, because after that ridiculous monstrosity of a cassette recorder disappeared, and I was able to complete the interview with Lenny in a very, very emotional state. And the antidote I would throw to you, in my office/den at my home to this day, my wife had framed my scorebook from that perfect game and opened to the pages of the scorebook, and the bottom of the eighth and the top of the ninth are vacant. And I didn't fill them in because I knew then, and I know today, it would be a tremendous talking point about that memorable, historic evening for Lenny Barker, the Cleveland Indians, the fans, and certainly yours truly.
Well, we've been close more than a few times, especially in my lifetime, but we haven't yet, but maybe soon we'll get another one. All right, this one comes from Andy. He says, "Hey, Bruce, Andres Jimenez, like Robbie Alomar, is a natural shortstop converted to second base. How would you compare and contrast the two aforementioned players?"
Yeah, I think it's a great question, as usual, coming from Andy. Robbie's the best defensive second baseman ever. So, and I think Omar and Ozzie Smith, there's an argument about the greatest defensive shortstops ever. Think how privileged we were to have Omar team up with Robbie for those 3 years. It was fantastic entertainment. Never seen anything like it. I think Jimenez is just fantastic. I just can't say enough about him. And I love what he's doing at the plate this year. It's reminiscent. I hope he can keep it up consistently, which is the name of the game in baseball, like he did 2 years ago, and that is hitting in the clutch and 2-out situations. That is the toughest challenge to a hitter, a 2-out clutch base hit. Jimenez was fantastic at it 2 years ago, and he's showing signs this year of doing the same. So hopefully he can keep it up, but I love him.
All right, Bruce. This one comes from Dan. He says, Miami Marlins have officially taken the crown for the worst record in Major League Baseball after the fact that they beat the White Sox he's talking about now, beat the Guardians 3 games. Do you think the Chicago White Sox are maybe a little better than people are giving them credit for?
I wouldn't go that far. I mean, if you talk to the Chicago White Sox fans, and of course I'm originally from there, and I have many sources back in Chicago who the fans are in it. There is a much, 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 much larger fan base for the Cubs than there is for the White Sox in Chicago. But that fan base for the White Sox is incredibly loyal. But even they are in a state of disarray. not knowing where this organization's going. I mean, they got rid of all their top pitchers, and they got this Fetty now. He's pretty good, but that's about the only glimmer of hope they have. All their power, and even Anderson is gone and went to Miami. But, Miami's pretty pathetic. 12-32 record, 18.5 out. They have a winning percentage of .273. Isn't it amazing, Ryan? They were in the playoffs last
I know.
year.
That is nuts. That is absolutely nuts. All right, last one here. We'll flip over to the Browns. It says, hey, Bruce, now that the NFL schedule is almost all but released, it'll be officially released tonight, actually. The Browns have now avoided 8 years of playing an international game. Are you a fan of international games in general, and would you like to see the Browns play one?
I know Goodell would like to insert a franchise in London. Logistically speaking, I don't know how feasible that is. I mean, if you send a West Coast team to London, or vice versa, London goes to Denver, one of the West Coast cities, you got to keep them out there, don't you? I mean, that's just such a tediously long flight. I know that they've been indoctrinating the British people with American football now for quite a few years. I would hope that the Browns can avoid it only because of those traveling logistics. Because it is got to be, anybody that's flown knows there is such a thing as jet lag, and especially with professional athletes, even though they're in extremely tremendous condition, it's still got a wear and tear on you mentally and physically. So I would hope we can avoid it, but I think it's inevitable that every NFL team will have to experience it. Hey, they're even doing it in baseball. Went down to Mexico City, as you well know, Ryan. So with baseball, you have much more of an international sport. I mean, 99% of the players in the NFL are Americans. But that's not the case in Major League Baseball, especially with the Asian influx. And, of course, the Caribbean countries and the South American countries for years have been in players coming out of those countries into the major leagues. And hockey is incredibly international with the Europeans, and even basketball now with Europeans and the influx of them into the league. So, but not football. So we shall see where this goes. But I know Goodell's goal is to have a franchise eventually in London. I'm looking forward to seeing that schedule for the Browns, and we'll cover that on next week's show, that's for sure. Ryan, you have a good one, buddy. I'll see you next week, pal.
Absolutely. Bruce, I'm feeling a no-hitter today. Call me crazy. Call me crazy.
I'm Bruce Drennan. On behalf of Ryan Smith, that's all the time we have for this version of Bonus Time with Drennan here on the Big Play Sports Network. Have a wonderful week. Enjoy all the sports. We'll see you next week. Until then, as always, and most importantly, you remember, I love you, Ohio. And I love you.